In the vast, indifferent void of space, you either adapt or you get squished like a bug on a windshield. Captain Jax Varn liked to think he was pretty good at not getting squished. Of course, that still left plenty of room for things to go wrong. "Welcome to Xylar," Jax muttered as his boots clanked against the cold metal of the asteroid mining colony's control room, where dreams go to die and contracts come to get chewed up and spat out. His team followed him in, a ragtag group of professional misfits with more attitude than skill, and more skill than patience. They were here for one thing and one thing only: profit. Not that there was much to be found in this rock-infested corner of the galaxy. Xylar was the kind of place that even God had forgotten to bless with a single damn thing. But hey, it was home. "For now, Captain," said Tam, the team's engineer and part-time cynic, which around here was more full-time employment. "We've got some anomalous energy readings coming from Sector 13. Jax raised an eyebrow. "Sector 13? Isn't that where they said not to dig too deep? Something about disturbing the ancient, unspeakable horrors lying in wait." "Yeah, but they also said the cafeteria's beef stew was made with actual beef," Tam replied dryly. "I say we take our chances." Jax grinned, his trademark smirk that usually meant trouble for someone else. "All right, let's go poke the bear and see if it pokes back." The team shuffled down the narrow corridors, the harsh fluorescent lighting flickering like the dying hope of a miner's retirement plan. Jax led the way, mostly because the rest of them figured if something was going to kill them, it might as well start with their fearless leader. As they descended deeper into the asteroid, the hum of machinery grew louder, drowning out the sound of their own trepidation. The air was thick with the smell of oil and desperation, and the occasional hiss of steam venting from rusty pipes was like the asteroid's version of a sigh. "What do you think we'll find down there?" asked Kira, the team's navigator and resident optimist, though her optimism was mostly reserved for figuring out new ways to insult Jax. "Probably a bunch of rocks," Jax replied. "But if we're lucky, maybe some rocks with stories to tell." They reached Sector 13's entrance, a heavy steel door adorned with enough warning labels to make anyone think twice. Tam hacked the console, and the door creaked open with a groan that sounded almost disappointed. Inside, the cavern was massive, a cathedral of stone and silence. The team's flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing intricate carvings on the walls. Alien hieroglyphs, twisted and tangled like the thoughts of a mad god. "Well, this is cheerful," Tam muttered. "Remind me why we didn't just stick with asteroid mining?" "Because asteroid mining doesn't get you off this rock any faster," Jax said, stepping forward, his eyes scanning the carvings. "And we're all about getting out of here, remember?" Kira traced a finger over one of the symbols. "Looks like someone's diary. Day 302. Still stuck on a godforsaken asteroid. Send help. And snacks." Jax snorted. "I don't see any vending machines around, so let's just hope there's something useful here." As they moved deeper into the cavern, the energy readings grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. The air tingled with static, and the hair on the back of Jax's neck stood up as if trying to escape. "Captain," Tam said, his voice tense, "I'm picking up some strange life signs." "Non-human, very non-human." "Well, isn't that just peachy?" Jax replied. "Let's hope they're friendly. Or at least indifferent." They reached a chamber at the heart of the cavern, where an altar stood, bathed in an eerie, otherworldly glow. Strange devices surrounded it, humming with ancient power. "So, this is where the magic happens," Kira said, eyeing the altar with suspicion. "Or where we get turned into space dust," Tam added helpfully. Jax approached the altar, feeling like a moth drawn to a particularly electric flame. "What's the worst that could happen?" he said, mostly to himself. As if in response, the air crackled with energy, and the carvings on the walls began to glow, casting long shadows that danced like specters. The hum grew to a crescendo, a symphony of alien whispers echoing through the chamber. Captain?" Tam said, his voice barely audible over the escalating noise. "I think we might have woken something up." The altar pulsed with light, and a beam shot upwards, impacting the cavern ceiling and spreading like a web of luminescent veins. "Okay, now we're definitely in trouble," Jax muttered. "Suggestions, anyone?" "Run," Kira offered, backing away slowly. Before Jax could agree or disagree, the light coalesced into a towering figure, otherworldly and imposing. It gazed down at them with eyes that burned like twin suns. Who dares disturb the slumber of the Ancient Ones? A voice boomed, reverberating through the cavern. Jax took a deep breath, trying to ignore the voice in his head telling him to turn tail and run. We do?" he said, raising a hand as if answering a roll call. The figure regarded them with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. "Humans," it said, the word dripping with centuries of contempt. "You are not worthy." "Well, that's just rude," Kira muttered, crossing her arms. Jax, ever the diplomat, stepped forward. "Look, we're just humble asteroid miners trying to make a living. We didn't mean to wake you from your cosmic nap." The figure seemed to consider this, its luminous form flickering like a faulty projector. "You have trespassed upon sacred ground. For this, you must worship us." Tam snorted. "Worship? Last I checked, we're fresh out of prayers and offerings." Jax shot him a look. "What my friend means is, we're not exactly equipped for that kind of thing. But maybe we can come to an understanding?" The figure's eyes narrowed, and the room darkened. "There will be consequences for your intrusion." "Yeah, there usually are," Jax said, his voice steady even as his heart raced. "But maybe not today, right?" The figure seemed unimpressed. "We shall see." And with that, the light faded, leaving them in the dim glow of their flashlights, the cavern echoing with silence once more. "Well," Jax said, rubbing the back of his neck, "that was fun. Let's not do it again." "Agreed," Tam replied, already heading for the exit. "Let's get the hell out of here before they change their mind." As they made their way back to the surface, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that they had just poked a hornet's nest with a very short stick. "So," Kira said, falling into step beside him, "how long do you think before we end up as cosmic roadkill?" Jax sighed, hopefully long enough to make a decent getaway. And as they emerged into the harsh light of Xylar's endless gray horizon, Jax couldn't help but wonder if they'd just signed up for something far bigger than any of them had bargained for. The aftermath of their celestial encounter left Jax and his ragtag team of asteroid misfits standing in the cavern, staring at each other with expressions that ranged from disbelief to mild irritation. A giant light show and a cosmic being demanding reverence, just another Tuesday in Xylar. "Well, that was unexpected," Jax declared, rubbing his temples like he was trying to erase the memory. "Xynax, huh? Sounds like a bad cough syrup. Or a B-grade alien movie villain," Tam chimed in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I suppose next they'll ask for donations to the Feed the Malnourished Space Gods Fund." "Donation or not, they want us to worship them," Kira added, still trying to scrape the crust of alien drama off her boots. "What do you think they'll do when we don't?" Jax smirked. "Hopefully nothing more than what any disappointed god does, throw a tantrum and sulk in a corner." "Or," Tam interjected, "they might just reduce this heap of space rock to cosmic confetti." "Ever think about that, Captain?" "Ever the optimist, Tam," Jax retorted. "But I think we'll take our chances. We've got a mission, remember?" They began their trek back through the dank corridors of Xylar, the air still heavy with the distant thrum of machinery and a new, subtle tension. Jax led the way, his mind already racing over the million and one ways this could all go horribly wrong. "So, we're just going to ignore the demands of glowing space deities and carry on with our mission like nothing happened?" Kira asked, her tone a blend of skepticism and grudging admiration. "That's the plan," Jax confirmed. "We've got a job to do, and it doesn't involve bowing to a light bulb with delusions of grandeur." Tam snorted. "If anything goes wrong, at least we'll go out as the crew too stubborn to worship a deity." "Not a bad epitaph, really. One for the ages," Jax agreed, flashing a grin that, in any other context, might have been reassuring. They emerged from the cavern into the mining colony's familiar chaos. Miners bustled about, oblivious to the divine drama unfolding beneath their feet. Some greeted the crew with nods, others too engrossed in their own misery to care. "Back to the grind," Kira muttered, taking in the scene. "Somehow, it feels more comforting than cosmic threats." "Misery loves company," Jax replied with a wry smile. "And this place is overflowing with both." The control room was a cramped mess of screens and wires, like a techno squid had exploded and left its tentacles draped across every surface. Jax settled into his chair, propping his feet up like a man who had just decided to ignore the apocalypse. "All right, team, let's get back to business. Tam, what's the status on those energy readings?" Tam punched a few keys, his eyes scanning the data. Readings are still coming from Sector 13, but they're fluctuating. It's like the gods are doing the hokey-pokey with the power grid. Perfect, Jack said. Let's run our diagnostics and see what we can salvage. Maybe something useful will come out of this mess. Because when has anything ever gone wrong when we ignore ominous warnings and ancient powers? Kira quipped, settling into her own console. Jax chuckled. Hey, if we played it safe, we'd still be digging in the dirt back on Earth. That's assuming Earth still has dirt worth digging, Tam added, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. As they worked, the ambient noise of the colony settled into a familiar rhythm. The hum of machinery, the distant clang of metal on metal, the occasional curse from a miner with less patience than sense. It was almost comforting, in a masochistic sort of way. Captain, Tam said after a while, his voice cutting through Jax's thoughts. Got something interesting here. One of the devices we found in the chamber seems to be a data storage unit. Ancient alien diaries? Jax asked, perking up. Maybe we can finally solve the mystery of why they chose to nap here. Or it'll just be their grocery list, Kira suggested. Eternal rest comes with a side of boredom, after all. Tam smirked. Let's find out. I'll run a decryption and see what we can dig up. While Tam worked, Jax leaned back, staring at the ceiling and imagining he could see through the layers of rock and metal to the stars beyond. It was a nice thought. Freedom, adventure, the unknown. All the things that brought him to this desolate corner of space in the first place. Any chance we can use this data to bargain with Xynax? Kira asked, half-jokingly. Data for divine mercy? Jax pondered. Wouldn't be the strangest trade I've made. But let's see what it says first. A series of beeps signaled Tam's success, and a holographic display flickered to life, casting a pale blue glow across the room. Lines of alien script scrolled past, indecipherable but undeniably intriguing. Looks like a log, Tam said, sifting through the data. Entries from whoever was here before. Researchers, maybe? So not just glorified rock collectors like us, Kira commented. They might have left something useful. Tam continued to translate, the alien text morphing into fragmented but comprehensible English. They were studying the energy fluctuations. Something about a resonance with the divine core. Whatever that means. Sounds like they were trying to harness the power, Jax mused. And failed spectacularly, I'd wager. Or succeeded too well, Tam replied. Either way, they woke something they couldn't control. Like poking a sleeping dragon and hoping it breathes rainbows, Kira said dryly. Well, if there's one thing we're good at, it's waking things we shouldn't, Jax said with a sigh. But maybe we can use this. If they were researching the energy, there might be a way to stabilize it. Or redirect it, Tam suggested. Possibly even send it back where it came from. Jax nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. Okay, let's focus on that. If we can control the energy, we might just have a bargaining chip. And if not? Kira asked, her voice steady despite the implication. Jax shrugged. Then we run like hell and hope Xynax has other priorities. The crew set to work, the tension in the room replaced by a palpable sense of purpose. It was a familiar dance, the thrill of the unknown, the rush of discovery, the looming threat of imminent death. Just another day in the life of space miners. As they delved deeper into the alien logs, a picture began to emerge. The previous occupants had indeed been researchers, attempting to tap into the energy at the heart of the asteroid. Their notes were filled with calculations, hypotheses, and the occasional desperate plea for salvation. Looks like they were onto something, Tam said, pointing to a section of the log. They found a way to stabilize the energy, but it required a precise sequence of activations. Which they probably botched, Jax surmised. Hence the angry light show. Typical, Kira remarked. Leave it to scientists to overthink things and underprepare for divine retribution. Well, we've got what they didn't, Jax said, gesturing to their makeshift lab. A second chance and a crew too stubborn to die quietly. They worked tirelessly, piecing together the alien researchers' theories and adapting them to their own tools. It was a gamble, but if they could stabilize the energy, they might just avert catastrophe, or at least buy themselves some time. As the hours passed, the crew fell into a rhythm, their banter punctuated by the steady hum of machinery and the clatter of tools. It was a symphony of survival, the melody of human ingenuity in the face of the unknown. Or maybe just a cacophony of chaos, depending on who you asked. All right, Tam announced finally, wiping sweat from his brow. I think we've got something. If my calculations are correct, and I never doubt my own genius, we should be able to reroute the energy flow. Should? Kira echoed, raising an eyebrow. Hey, I'm an engineer, not a miracle worker, Tam snapped back. But it's the best shot we've got. Jax grinned. Good enough for me. Let's see if we can teach Zynax a little humility. Armed with their makeshift solution, the crew prepared to return to Sector 13. They suited up, the weight of the task ahead pressing down on them like a physical force. But there was something else too. A glimmer of hope, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. Ready to poke the dragon again? Jax asked, his eyes gleaming with determination. Let's just hope it's in a forgiving mood, Kira replied, adjusting her helmet. As they descended once more into the depths of the asteroid, Jax couldn't help but smile. Sure, they were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of their league. But they had each other, and that counted for something. Besides, in a universe where gods demanded worship and ancient powers lurked around every corner, there was one thing Jax knew for certain. Humanity had a knack for survival. And if they had to thumb their noses at a few cosmic deities along the way, well, that was just a bonus. Sector 13 awaited, its cavernous maw opening before them like the jaws of some ancient beast. The alien carvings glimmered in the darkness, their secrets tantalizingly close. Let's do this, Jax said, leading the way into the abyss. In the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that even in the face of the divine, humans could stand tall, laugh in the face of danger, and forge their own destiny. Because if there was one thing humans were good at, it was making trouble, and getting out of it by the skin of their teeth. They trudged back into Sector 13, that charming little slice of cosmic hell where every shadow felt like it was watching you. The alien carvings on the walls glimmered as if mocking their very presence. But hey, at least they weren't glowing ominously this time. Small victories, right? Feels like home, Tam muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he adjusted his helmet. A very hostile, uninviting home. Just keep your eyes peeled, Jax said, leading the way with all the confidence of a man who knew he was in way over his head but couldn't quite care. We poke the dragon, we watch for fire. Of course, things rarely went as planned. They'd barely started setting up their equipment when the first tremor hit. The ground shook with a malicious glee that suggested the asteroid itself was in on the joke. Tam stumbled, catching himself against a wall. Nice of the universe to remind us who's boss, he said, shaking his head. Yeah, Mother Nature's got a cruel sense of humor, Jax replied, trying to keep his footing as well as his dignity. Kira, who'd been tinkering with a device that looked suspiciously like a bomb, glanced up. Just a bit of cosmic indigestion. Nothing to worry about unless it belches. Oh, good. I was hoping for a minor apocalypse today, Tam shot back, rolling his eyes. The tremor subsided, leaving behind an eerie silence that pressed in on them like a tangible thing. Jax surveyed the room, a frown creasing his forehead. Let's just get this done before things get weirder. Define weirder, Kira said, raising an eyebrow. Because this asteroid's already set the bar pretty high. They resumed their work, each of them keeping one eye on the instruments and the other on their surroundings. The alien logs had given them a basic idea of what to do, but executing the plan was another matter entirely. And then, almost as if in response to their skepticism, reality decided to take a vacation. The equipment started to flicker, the lights strobed like they were trying out for a rave, and the very air seemed to shimmer with an unsettling energy. Anyone else feeling like we're in a bad sci-fi movie? Tam asked, squinting at his console as if the numbers were personally offending him. Either that, or we're about to meet our new overlords, Jax replied, trying to sound casual but not quite managing it. Kira smacked her device with the kind of frustration only an engineer could muster. Damn thing's acting like it's possessed. Maybe it is, Tam said with a shrug. Wouldn't be the worst thing I've seen today. As if on cue, a low hum reverberated through the chamber, a sound so deep it seemed to shake their very bones. The alien carvings flared to life, casting an eerie, pulsating light that danced across the walls. It's like the decor's trying to kill us, Kira noted dryly, shielding her eyes. Jax let out a slow breath, the kind you take when you're trying to convince yourself that running screaming into the void isn't the worst idea. Okay, let's assume that's not a good sign. Assuming it is, we should probably haul ass, Tam suggested, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he tried desperately to stabilize the flickering displays. No argument here, Jax agreed. But first, let's see if we can get any useful data out of this mess. They worked in tense silence, the room filled with the clatter of keys and the occasional curse. Every now and then, the lights would flicker, casting the chamber into shadows that seemed to reach out and grab at them. Got something, Kira said suddenly, holding up a data slate like it was a trophy. Looks like part of the alien sequence we need. Great, Jax said, nodding. Because who doesn't love a scavenger hunt in the middle of an existential crisis? They pressed on, piecing together fragments of information like a puzzle designed by a sadist. The alien tech was ancient and temperamental, its secrets locked behind layers of complex algorithms. And then, as if the universe had decided to throw them a bone, the flickering displays snapped into focus. Data streamed across the screens, a cascade of alien script that slowly resolved into something they could just about understand. Looks like they were using some kind of resonance to stabilize the core, Tam reported, his eyes flicking over the translated text. If we can replicate it, we might be able to calm this place down. Or blow it to hell, Kira added, ever the optimist. True, Jax admitted, but if we do nothing, we're definitely screwed. So let's give it a shot. As they worked, the strange phenomena continued to escalate. Time seemed to warp around them, moments stretching and contracting at random as if the universe was an accordion played by a cosmic toddler. Kira glanced at her chronometer, frowning. Either this thing's on the fritz, or we've been here for an eternity. I only feel about 100 years older, Tam replied, blinking against the light show. Must be something in the air, or lack thereof, Jax said, but let's keep our heads in the game. If we're lucky, we might actually make it out of this alive. Ah yes, alive, my favorite state of being, Tam quipped. Second only to not being vaporized. Despite the chaos, there was a strange camaraderie in their shared madness. Here they were, in the depths of an asteroid on the edge of known space, defying gods and logic with nothing more than stubbornness and a few scraps of alien tech. Jax couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. You know, I think I finally get why people used to look up at the stars and dream. Kira chuckled, a sound tinged with irony. Yeah? And why's that, Captain? Because it's a damn sight better than looking down here and realizing we're all just ants under a cosmic magnifying glass, he replied. Uplifting as always, Tam said. But hey, at least we're not alone in the ant farm. They continued to work, each of them driven by that indefinable human urge to make sense of the senseless, to conquer the unconquerable. The data slowly coalesced into a plan, one that was either brilliant or suicidal, or maybe both. All right, Jax said finally, stepping back from the console. We've got our sequence. Let's see if we can make Xynax take a nap. Just don't expect a bedtime story, Kira said as she prepared the equipment for the resonance activation. Tam double-checked their calculations, his expression a mix of determination and muted terror. If this works, we're legends. If not, well, at least we'll go out with style. Jax nodded, his face set in grim resolve. Let's show them what humans are made of. They initiated the sequence, a delicate ballet of energy manipulation that danced through the chamber like a phantom. The carvings pulsed in response, their glow intensifying to a blinding brilliance. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. The air vibrated with an almost palpable tension, like a rubber band stretched to its limit. Jax held his breath, knowing that this was it, the make or break moment. And then, with a sound like the universe exhaling, the energy stabilized. The lights faded to a gentle hum, the carvings dimmed, and the oppressive weight of the divine presence receded. We did it, Kira breathed, her voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. Tam let out a whoop of triumph, grinning like a madman. Take that, Xynax. Who's the deity now? Jax allowed himself a small smile, feeling the weight of 1,000 anxieties lift from his shoulders. All right, folks, let's get out of here before the gods change their minds. They gathered their equipment, moving with a new sense of urgency. Time was still a fickle beast, but now it seemed to work in their favor, helping them retrace their steps through the labyrinthine corridors. As they emerged into the relative safety of the mining colony, they were met with the curious stares of miners who'd paused in their labor to watch the spectacle. What's the deal, Captain? One called out, a burly man with a face like a granite slab. Did you figure out how to appease the rock gods? Let's just say we gave them a reason to back off, Jax replied, a wry grin on his face. Tam waved a dismissive hand. Nothing to worry about, just your regular cosmic exorcism. The miners laughed, and the crew felt a warmth in the easy camaraderie. Against all odds, they had faced the divine and lived to tell the tale. It was a victory carved from the bedrock of human tenacity, a testament to what they could achieve when they refused to bow down. And as they made their way back to the control room, Jax knew that they'd won more than just their lives. They'd won the right to stand defiant in a universe that sought to crush them. A small victory, perhaps, but one that mattered. After all, in a cosmos where gods and monsters roamed, there was something to be said for a crew that could look the infinite in the eye and laugh. In the dimly lit confines of the control room, Jax Varn stood with a scowl etched across his face like an old scar. The glow from the screens painted him in a sickly green hue, making him look more alien than the gods they were up against. Not that he needed help with that. He had long perfected the art of looking like he could chew nails and spit out a smile. So, what's the bad news? Tam asked, leaning back in his chair with an air of someone who had long since stopped believing in good news. Well, our friendly neighborhood gods have been sucking their juice from the colony's energy core, Jax replied, rubbing the back of his neck. Turns out, all this divine posturing is really just them hijacking our power source. Kira snorted, fiddling with her ever-present device. So, they're just cosmic leeches? I honestly expected more celestial pizzazz. Yeah, you'd think deities would have more class. Maybe a harp or a cloud or two, Tam added, sarcasm practically dripping from his words. Jax glanced at the schematics flickering on the main console. If we disrupt the connection, we could cut their power. But they'd probably retaliate. And by probably, I mean we'll be lucky if we avoid turning into space dust. Before we decide to poke the bear, or God bear, or whatever, Kira said, raising an eyebrow, what's Plan B? Plan B is praying it works, Jax answered with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Too bad gods don't answer calls when you're trying to screw them over. Tam let out a low whistle. So, do we tell the miners to pack their bags or what? We'll keep it on the down low for now, Jax replied, his expression hardening. No need to spark a panic unless we have to. They set to work, the atmosphere tense with unspoken fears and unspoken hopes. It was like defusing a bomb with a blindfold on, but that was par for the course in their line of work. Jax couldn't remember the last mission that didn't require equal parts luck, wit, and a reckless disregard for personal safety. Kira was the first to break the silence, her voice cutting through the low hum of machinery. You think these gods have a Yelp page? Because I've got some critiques. Yeah, not as advertised, would be at the top of my list, Tam said, not looking up from his monitor. Also, hostile takeover of energy sources should really be in the fine print. Jax chuckled, though it felt like a hollow sound in the oppressive air. Well, if we survive this, I'll leave a review. 1 star. Would not recommend. Very smite why. As they pieced together a plan, the temperature in the control room seemed to drop. A chill crept into their bones, a subtle reminder that the gods were not amused by their meddling. The psychic attacks started as whispers, barely audible yet somehow deafening. Jax grimaced, shaking his head as if to dislodge the buzzing, insistent voices. Well, that's new. Did someone leave the radio on, or are the gods just whispering sweet nothings? Sounds more like sweet threats, Tam corrected, his expression twisted in concentration as he tried to block out the intrusion. Kira tapped at her device, her brow furrowed. I'm working on jamming their frequency. If I can amplify the static, it might drown them out. That's the spirit, Jax said dryly. Fight divine power with good old-fashioned human noise. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, like a chorus of angry bees in their skulls. Each word carried the weight of 1,000 warnings, a testament to their impending doom should they continue their defiance. Tam winced, massaging his temples. You'd think gods would have better things to do than give us headaches. Maybe they've got a quota to meet, Kira suggested, her fingers flying across her device's interface. Or they're just really bored. Jax gritted his teeth, focusing on the console as though sheer willpower could keep him sane. Let's finish this before they decide to up the ante. It was a race against time, the trio working with the kind of frenetic energy that only desperation could fuel. The air felt heavy, thick with the presence of unseen watchers, and every second seemed to stretch into an eternity. Almost. There, Kira muttered, her voice straining with effort. Just a bit more. With a final keystroke, the room was filled with a high-pitched whine, a sound so discordant it felt like it was peeling away layers of reality itself. The whispers faltered, then faded, leaving behind a blessed silence. Well, I'd call that a success, Tam said, exhaling a shaky breath. And here I thought silence was just for libraries. Jax nodded, relief washing over him despite the lingering tension in the air. We're not out of the woods yet, but at least we can think straight. Thinking straight's overrated, Kira quipped, though her smile was genuine. But in this case, I'll make an exception. With the psychic assault temporarily halted, the team redoubled their efforts to complete the disruption device. It was a crude thing, cobbled together from spare parts and sheer determination, but it might just do the trick. Jax stepped back to survey their handiwork. Looks like a tangled mess of wires and bad decisions. That's because it is, Kira shot back, wiping her hands on her jumpsuit. But if it works, we'll be heroes. Or at least not corpses. I'll take not a corpse for 500, Alex, Tam said, injecting a bit of levity into the oppressive atmosphere. Jax allowed himself a small laugh. We'll be heroes the moment we blow this asteroid to hell and live to tell the tale. The miners outside the control room continued their work, blissfully unaware of the cosmic chess game unfolding around them. Jax watched them for a moment, a pang of envy hitting him. Ignorance truly was bliss. All right, he said, turning back to the team. Let's kick these gods off their throne. Kira nodded, her fingers dancing over the controls with the kind of dexterity that only came from years of fixing things that shouldn't be broken. Setting the device to overload the core's output. It'll force a shutdown, or an explosion, Tam added helpfully. Either way, it'll be spectacular. Jax rolled his eyes. Let's aim for the less explosive outcome. As Kira initiated the sequence, the room was bathed in a harsh, flickering light. The control panel buzzed angrily, like an old machine protesting its mistreatment. Here goes nothing, Jax murmured, crossing his fingers more out of habit than hope. The device whirred to life, its makeshift components straining under the pressure. The energy core beyond the walls began to fluctuate, its output spiking erratically. Steady, Kira muttered, adjusting the settings with the ease of someone who'd survived more close calls than she could count. The gods, realizing the threat, redoubled their efforts to maintain control. The whispers returned, louder and more frantic, but Kira's amplifier held firm, drowning out the divine noise with its own brand of chaos. Tam kept his focus on the readings, his expression a mix of concentration and dread. Almost there, just need a bit more power. The control room shuddered, the walls groaning in protest as the core's energy reached critical levels. The god's fury was palpable, a silent scream that reverberated through the very fabric of the asteroid. Jax held his breath, waiting for the inevitable, and then, like a light switch flicking off, the energy core stabilized. The flickering lights returned to their usual dim glow, and the oppressive presence that had haunted them since the mission's start began to recede. Kira let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Did we just? We did, Jax confirmed, a grin spreading across his face despite the exhaustion tugging at him. We cut them off. Tam punched the air triumphantly. Take that, you celestial parasites. The miners outside continued about their business, oblivious to the cosmic battle that had just taken place. Jax couldn't help but shake his head at the absurdity of it all. They'd faced down gods and lived to see another day, yet to the rest of the colony, it was just another Wednesday. Let's make sure the core's stable, Jax said, turning his attention back to the console. And then we can get the hell out of here. Kira nodded, double-checking her calculations with the precision of someone who knew the consequences of a single misstep. Looks good. We might actually make it out alive. Might, Tam repeated, his tone light but undercut with seriousness. Always the optimist. With the energy core secure and the god's influence waning, they began the process of shutting down the device. It had served its purpose, but leaving it active was a risk they couldn't afford to take. As they worked, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of weary triumph. They'd faced the divine and emerged victorious, albeit a little worse for wear. Jax leaned back, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. Well, that was easy, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Piece of cake, Kira agreed, flashing a tired smile. Now let's never do it again. Seconded, Tam said, his expression a mix of relief and disbelief. I think I've had enough of gods for one lifetime. They gathered their gear, the weight of the mission finally beginning to lift. As they prepared to leave the control room, Jax paused, taking one last look at the monitors. Think they'll come back? Kira asked, her tone casual but her eyes serious. Jax considered the question, then shrugged. Maybe, but if they do, we'll be ready. Yeah, Tam said, slinging his pack over his shoulder. And next time, we'll bring a bigger stick. As they made their way through the winding corridors of the colony, Jax couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They'd stood against gods and held their ground. In a universe that seemed determined to crush them, they'd shown that sometimes, even the smallest of players could make a difference. And as they stepped out into the asteroid's bleak landscape, Jax knew that whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together. With a little luck, a lot of grit, and more than their fair share of gallows humor. Because in the end, what else did they have? Let's get the hell out of here, Jax said, leading the way back to their ship. Before the gods changed their minds. With that, they left the asteroid behind, a small, tenacious crew in an uncaring universe. A crew that had laughed in the face of the divine and lived to tell the tale. The ship's engines kicked into gear with a groan that sounded suspiciously like a death rattle. Jax Varn, leader of this merry band of cosmic misfits, settled into the pilot's seat with all the enthusiasm of a man about to dive into a pit of angry ferrets. All right, let's not die today, he muttered, flipping switches with the kind of finesse you'd expect from someone who'd spent the last decade cheating death. Tam snorted from the co-pilot's seat, his face a monument to skepticism. That's the spirit, Captain. If we don't die today, we get to die another day. Something to look forward to. Kira, their resident tech wizard and master of sarcastic commentary, was nose deep in her device. Can we just focus on not getting squished by the gods again? That'd be a nice change. The ship shuddered violently as if the universe had taken their request as a personal challenge. Lights flickered in a mocking dance, and the console spat out a string of error codes that screamed, "You're screwed," in digital shorthand. Jax grimaced, slamming his fist against the incooperative machinery. Damn it, I said not today, you piece of junk. Maybe it just doesn't like your tone, Kira suggested, a wry smile tugging at her lips. Tam punched a button with more hope than assurance, causing the ship's interior lights to flicker before returning to their usual dull glow. Should we be worried that the ship's responding to us like a moody teenager? Only if it starts listening to emo music, Jax replied, adjusting his grip on the control stick. The ship, affectionately dubbed the Bucket, lurched forward with all the grace of a drunken rhino, and they were off into the void. Sector 13 lingered like a bad hangover, its oppressive energy clawing at the frayed edges of their sanity. It was the kind of place where hope went to die, and optimism was a four-letter word. You think the gods are pissed? Kira mused, her fingers dancing over her device as she scanned for any traces of divine interference. Wouldn't you be? Tam countered, gesturing vaguely at the swirling nothingness outside. We just kicked them off their power source. I'd say they're a tad miffed. Jax focused on the screens, which were as helpful as a blindfold in a shooting range. Let him be angry. As long as they're not sucking up our energy, I don't really care what they do. A low rumble echoed through the ship, a subtle reminder that their temporary victory was just that, temporary. The asteroid was still out there, a cosmic time bomb waiting to go off. Well, that's not ominous at all, Tam muttered, glancing at the readouts as if sheer willpower could change them. Energy levels are dropping faster than my patience. Remind me why we didn't just blow this rock to hell? Kira asked, her voice light but her eyes dark with worry. Something about not wanting to be smeared across the cosmos, Jax replied, keeping his tone casual even as his grip tightened on the controls. Another tremor rocked the ship, sending a cascade of tools clattering to the floor. It felt like the universe was testing them, waiting for the moment they'd finally break. Okay, I'm officially worried, Tam admitted, his usual bravado slipping. We're sitting ducks out here. Kira looked up from her device, her expression unreadable. And the gods are the hunters. Fantastic. The air in the ship grew colder, the kind of chill that sank into your bones and refused to leave. It was a familiar sensation, one that whispered of cosmic forces beyond their understanding and a reminder of their insignificance. Jax took a deep breath, forcing his racing thoughts into some semblance of order. "We've faced worse odds. Name one," Tam challenged, his voice sharp with tension. "How about the time we outran that supernova?" Kira suggested, raising an eyebrow. Tam snorted. "We didn't outrun it, we just got lucky. Or the time we pissed off the Xylarians and lived to tell the tale." Jax added, a trace of humor in his voice despite the situation. "Fine," Tam conceded, a reluctant smile cracking through his facade. "We've faced worse. Doesn't make this any less terrifying." The ship groaned again, as if agreeing with Tam's assessment. It was a sound that spoke of imminent collapse, the kind of noise that made you question your life choices. "What's the plan, Captain?" Kira asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and cynicism. "Plan?" Jax echoed, his grin more grimace than anything else. "Survive. Everything else is a bonus." "Great plan," Tam said, giving Jax a sardonic thumbs up. Short, sweet, and to the point. The gods' presence had become a tangible weight, pressing down on them with the promise of retribution. It was a cosmic game of cat and mouse, and they were the mice, small, insignificant, and very much on the menu. "Think they're watching us right now?" Kira wondered aloud, her eyes scanning the monitors for signs of divine interference. "Wouldn't surprise me," Jax replied, his voice edged with defiance. "Let him watch. We've got front row seats to the universe's weirdest sitcom." Tam laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that held no real mirth. "As long as we don't become the punchline." The ship's lights flickered one last time before settling into a steady glow. It was a small victory, but they took it for what it was. Proof that they were still in the fight, however outmatched they might be. "Jax," Kira said suddenly, her gaze fixed on the device in her hands. "I've got something." "What kind of something?" Jax asked, a flicker of hope creeping into his voice despite himself. "Energy spike near the core," Kira reported, her fingers working furiously over the controls. "It's not us. It's them." "Great," Tam said, his voice thick with irony. "Just when I was starting to miss their charming company." Jax turned his attention to the screens, the green glow casting eerie shadows across his face. "Can we use it to our advantage?" Kira considered for a moment, her mind a whirlwind of calculations and probabilities. "Maybe, if we can channel it, disrupt their siphoning process. Then we might just get the upper hand," Jax finished, a plan beginning to form in his mind. "Let's make it happen." The gods' whispers returned, a chorus of enraged voices echoing through their skulls. It was a sound that promised pain, a reminder that they were playing with forces far beyond their understanding. "Think they'll give us a break if we ask nicely?" Tam joked, though his eyes betrayed the strain he was under. Kira snorted, her focus never wavering. "Sure, Tam, and maybe they'll invite us to tea while they're at it." "Tea with the gods," Jax mused, shaking his head. "Now there's a terrifying thought." The ship rumbled again, the vibrations resonating deep within their bones. It was a warning, a promise of worse to come, and Jax knew they were running out of time. "Let's do this," he said, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. "We cut them off once, we can do it again." "With what?" Tam asked, his voice laced with skepticism. Jax grinned, though it was more teeth than humor. "With whatever we've got left." Kira worked her magic, the device in her hands a blur of motion. It was a desperate gamble, but they'd faced longer odds and come out on top. The ship shuddered, the walls groaning in protest as they strained against the divine forces at work. It was a battle of wills, a clash of mortal determination against celestial might. "Hold it steady," Jax said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. Tam nodded, his hands steady on the controls. Just another day at the office. The energy core flickered, its output erratic and unstable. It was a wild card in this cosmic game, a variable that could tip the scales in their favor or doom them all. "One more adjustment," Kira muttered, her concentration absolute. "Just a bit more." The gods' whispers crescendoed, a cacophony of rage and frustration that threatened to overwhelm them. It was a test of endurance, a trial by fire that would determine their fate. Jax held his breath, willing the universe to bend to their will, and then, with a final surge of power, the energy core stabilized. The ship settled into a calm equilibrium, the oppressive presence of the gods receding like a tide. We did it, Kira said, her voice a mix of disbelief and triumph. About damn time, Tam added, his relief palpable. They'd bought themselves a reprieve, a chance to regroup and plan their next move. But even as they celebrated their small victory, Jax knew the gods would not let this slight go unanswered. They were still out there, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Let's not get too comfortable, Jax warned, his eyes scanning the screens for any sign of the gods' return. They'll be back, and we'll be ready, Kira said, her voice steady and sure. Yeah, Tam agreed, a determined glint in his eye. Bring him on. They had survived another round in this cosmic dance, but Jax knew the game was far from over. The gods would regroup, reassess, and return with a vengeance. But for now, they'd earned a moment of respite, a brief pause in the relentless struggle. Jax looked at his crew, their faces lined with fatigue but alight with determination. They were battered, bruised, and running on fumes, but they were still standing. Still fighting. In the vast, indifferent expanse of space, where gods and mortals clashed and reality itself could bend and shatter, that was no small thing. Let's finish what we started, Jax said, his voice a quiet vow. With that, they turned their attention back to the controls, ready to face whatever came next. Whether it was gods, asteroids, or the myriad dangers the universe held in store, they would meet it head-on. Because in the end, what else was there to do? The control room, as dimly lit as ever, bore witness to Jax, Tam, and Kira, three misfits in a cosmos that seemed hell-bent on squashing them like cosmic cockroaches. Jax leaned back in his chair, the screens casting an unsettling green glow that made everyone look like they'd been smearing toxic waste on their faces. So, gods have a weak spot, Jax said, breaking the silence. Who knew they were just as emo as the rest of us? Tam raised an eyebrow, his skepticism never far from the surface. You think they cry into their celestial pillows at night, or just throw a universal tantrum? Kira, fingers still dancing over her device, smirked. Maybe both. I bet they've got a playlist titled Existential Dread on loop. Jax chuckled, though it was the kind of laugh you might hear at a funeral, the sound of someone who's accepted their fate but decided to mock it along the way. Seriously though, if they're vulnerable to emotions, maybe we can use that to our advantage. Tam snorted. What, you're planning to give them therapy? I doubt a hug and some kind words will make them stop siphoning our power. No, but maybe we can piss them off, Kira suggested. Get them so worked up they slip up. Jax nodded, a plan forming in his mind. Exactly. We push their buttons, exploit their weaknesses. What's more human than making things personal? Nothing says, screw you, quite like a little psychological warfare, Tam agreed, a wicked grin spreading across his face. The ship shuddered again, reminding them that while they were plotting, the universe was still keen on throwing curveballs their way. The bucket, their trusty yet temperamental ship, responded to the tremors with a sound that was a cross between a groan and a laugh. Like it knew the joke was on them. Think it'll hold together? Jax asked, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Tam gave the controls a pat, the way you might comfort a pet that had just peed on your favorite rug. She's never let us down before. Except all those times she did, Kira added, not missing a beat. Details, Tam muttered, waving a dismissive hand. Besides, it's not like we have a choice. The atmosphere in the control room was tense but charged with a new energy, a determination that defied the cosmic odds stacked against them. They were still the underdogs, but Jax had always liked those odds. Made victories taste sweeter. So, how do we get under the skin of beings who don't technically have skin? Tam asked, leaning back in his chair with the kind of casualness that came from having nothing left to lose. We find their Achilles heel, Kira said, her eyes gleaming with an idea. Or, whatever gods have instead of heels. Jax leaned forward, the screens casting strange shadows across his face. They like being worshipped, right? It's like their cosmic fuel. Yeah, but we're fresh out of incense and sacrificial goats, Tam quipped. Exactly, Jax said, a grin spreading across his face. So we deny them that. Strip them of whatever power they think they have. Make them feel small. Kira nodded, catching onto Jax's line of thinking. And how do humans make things small? By pointing out their flaws, Jax replied. By showing them they're not invincible. Tam was warming to the idea, his eyes sparking with interest. We mock them, show them they're just petulant children playing with grown-up toys. The ship hummed in agreement, or maybe it was just settling into the quiet after a hard-fought battle. Either way, it felt like a sign. So, let's get started, Jax said, his voice calm and steady. We've got some gods to annoy. Kira grinned, her fingers a blur on her device. I'll start compiling a list of their mess-ups. Shouldn't be too hard. Everyone hates perfect beings, after all. Not to mention they don't handle criticism well, Tam added with a smirk. I mean, look how they reacted when we unplugged their celestial vacuum cleaner. The three of them fell into a rhythm, feeding off each other's energy. It was a strange kind of camaraderie forged in the fires of shared peril and dark humor. They might be insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe, but they were scrappy and stubborn to boot. Okay, so what are our weapons? Jax asked, looking to his crew for ideas. Humor, Tam said, his grin wide enough to rival any cat. Nothing deflates an ego faster than a well-placed joke. And logic, Kira added, her tone light but her expression serious. If we can prove they're not as powerful as they think, we might just get under their non-existent skin. And if all else fails, Jax said, leaning back with a satisfied sigh, we do what humans do best, adapt and survive. The plan, as half-baked as it was, felt right. It felt human. They were taking the fight to the gods, armed with nothing but their wits and a stubborn refusal to bow. It was reckless, dangerous, and just their style. The control room was quiet for a moment, the only sound the soft whirring of the ship's systems. Jax took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down on them. But he also felt something else, hope. A fragile, flickering thing that refused to be snuffed out. So, what's next? Tam asked, breaking the silence with a casualness that belied the tension thrumming through the air. Jax looked at his crew, their faces lit by the ghostly glow of the screens. Now, we get creative. It was not the most concrete plan in the universe, but it was theirs. And sometimes, that was enough. The ship hummed around them, a familiar presence in the vastness of space. It wasn't much, but it was home. And together, they'd face whatever came next. Because in the end, what else was there to do but fight? The control room wasn't much, but it was theirs. The irony wasn't lost on Jax Varn as he stared at the flickering screens that refracted ghostly light across the trio like some kind of budget horror film. The gods were still out there, somewhere in the cosmic ether, plotting revenge. But they'd stirred the pot, and now it was time to enjoy the stew, if it didn't explode in their faces first. Tam kicked back, resting his boots on the console like he owned the place. If owning a malfunctioning ship in the middle of Sector 13 was something anyone wanted to brag about. Alright, so how do we poke the gods where it hurts without getting ourselves turned into cosmic confetti? Jax rubbed his chin, pretending to consider the question deeply. In reality, he was just buying time to think up a plan that didn't end with them as stardust. Easy, we hit them in the feels. Make them doubt themselves. Great, we'll just tell the gods they have a face only a mother could love, Tam shot back dryly. Problem solved. Kira tinkered with her device, her smirk a permanent fixture. Classic tactic. Make them feel as pathetic as they truly are. It's not like they've got centuries of therapy under their belts. Jax chuckled, a low, sardonic sound. Right, let's give them the full human experience. Sarcasm, disappointment, and a lack of purpose. The ship shuddered again, as if reminding them of the cosmic stakes. The bucket wasn't just temperamental. It was a diva with a penchant for breakdowns at the worst possible moments. Still, it was home, and they'd ride it to the end. First, we need to isolate their communication lines, Kira said, tapping away on her device. Cut their celestial chatter and keep them guessing. And how do you propose we do that, little Miss Fix-It? Tam asked, his voice dripping with playful skepticism. Kira didn't even look up. By overloading their frequencies. We flood them with so much noise they'll think they've wandered into a teenage concert. Jax nodded appreciatively. I like it. Nothing like a little existential white noise to make the gods reconsider their life choices. While they're dealing with that headache, Kira continued, we launch Phase 2, the roast of the millennium. Tam snorted. What, we hurl insults until they cry? If they can hear us over the noise, sure, Jax said with a grin. But really, we just need to get them riled up. Make them show their hand. Everyone's gotta tell, even gods. The air was thick with anticipation and a hint of the usual chaos that followed them like a shadow. They were outclassed, outgunned, but not out of options. Not yet. And in a universe where sempiternal beings demanded reverence, irreverence might just be their ticket to survival. So, who's writing our cosmic burn book? Tam asked, glancing at the screens as if expecting the gods to peek through any moment. I'll handle it, Kira volunteered, her fingers dancing over her device with a precision that suggested she'd been waiting for a chance to take a celestial being down a peg or two. You boys work on Plan B. What's Plan B? Tam questioned, arching an eyebrow. Jax shrugged. Same as Plan A but with more flair. Tam grinned. I like it. Who wouldn't want to go down in a blaze of half-assed glory? The atmosphere lightened, if only for a moment. It was like the calm before a storm, where every breath was stolen from fate's clenched fist. Time to put on a show, Jax said, standing up and adjusting his jacket. Let's make sure the gods remember the day they met humanity. Kira was already busy compiling a list of celestial faux pas while Tam fiddled with the ship's communication systems, cranking up the frequency to a point that would make any deity cover their ears, if they had them. Jax leaned over the console, his mind racing with the possibilities. All right, let's hit them where it hurts, their bloated egos. He accessed the ship's log, pulling up every scrap of intel they'd gathered. The gods might be ancient, but even they weren't immune to a bit of well-timed mockery. He'd have to dig deep, channel every bit of cynicism and wit they collectively had. Start with the obelisks, Jax muttered. Point out their structural instability. Nothing like showing their sacred monuments are one good sneeze away from collapse. Kira snorted. And their obsession with rituals. Bet they still haven't figured out why we stopped sacrificing goats, just makes the place smell. Or their need for attention, Tam added, warming to the theme. Always demanding worship like a bunch of cosmic influencers looking for likes. Jax grinned at his crew, the camaraderie a lifeline in the vast, indifferent void. They were ready to go head to head with the gods, armed with nothing but their human tenacity and an abundance of snark. Broadcasting in 3, 2, 1. Kira announced, her tone gleeful as the ship's systems hummed to life. The comms crackled with static, then silence, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Jax watched the screens, waiting for any sign that their message had been received. It was a shot in the dark, but what else was new? Nothing yet, Tam said, eyes glued to the readouts. Maybe the gods are too busy doing whatever it is gods do on a Saturday night. Or maybe they're just ignoring us, Jax suggested. Wouldn't be the first time. Keep at it, Kira said confidently. They'll hear us eventually, even if they don't want to. As the minutes ticked by, Jax felt the familiar gnaw of anxiety. The universe was a harsh mistress, rarely forgiving, and this stunt was stretching their luck to its limits. But they had to try. If nothing else, it was a reminder that they were still here, still resisting. Finally, Tam let out a low whistle. I think we've got their attention. The screens flared, data streaming in a chaotic, furious dance as the gods responded. It was a maelstrom of anger and confusion, their celestial composure crumbling under the weight of human defiance. Looks like someone's pissed, Kira said, her grin wide and unabashed. Jax felt a surge of triumph. They'd done it. They'd hit the gods where it hurt, stripping away the veneer of invincibility with nothing but words. It was a victory of sorts, even if it was just the beginning of a much larger fight. Get ready, Jax warned, his voice steady even as the ship shuddered beneath them. They're not going to take this lying down. Bring it on, Tam said with a cocky grin. We've survived worse. The control room was a cacophony of sound and light, the ship finally coming alive in a way that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. They were on the edge, teetering between triumph and disaster, but it was a place Jax had grown accustomed to. Let's keep them on their toes, Kira suggested, altering the frequency to keep the gods guessing. No rest for the wicked. Jax nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. They were running out of time, but they'd bought themselves a little breathing room. Enough to take the fight to the gods and make them regret underestimating humanity. The cosmic dance continued, an intricate waltz of defiance and desperation. In the face of overwhelming odds, Jax and his crew had chosen to stand their ground, their irreverence a beacon of hope in the darkness. All right, Jax said, his voice grim but determined. Let's finish what we started. The words hung in the air, a promise and a challenge all rolled into one. It was a battle they couldn't afford to lose, and they were going to give it everything they had. As the ship rocked with the gods' renewed fury, Jax felt a strange sort of peace. They were small, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. For humanity, for the right to exist in a universe that had tried to crush them at every turn. To hell with the odds, Tam muttered, bracing himself for whatever came next. Exactly, Jax agreed, a fierce grin on his face. Let's show them what we're made of. With that, they dove headlong into the storm, ready to face the gods and whatever else the universe had in store. Because in the end, what else was there to do but fight? The Bucket, their charmingly unreliable spacecraft, floated in the aftermath of their little tete-a-tete with the gods. If you'd call nearly getting transmogrified into celestial dust a conversation. Jax, Tam, and Kira sat in the control room, basking in the silence of victory. Or maybe it was just the calm before another storm. With their luck, probably the latter. Well, that was fun, Tam remarked, his voice dripping with sarcasm, boots still firmly planted on the console. Nothing like ticking off a bunch of cosmic beings to get the blood pumping. Jax chuckled, leaning back in his chair, the tension in his shoulders finally ebbing away. Think they'll put us on their "do not invite" list for the next millennium? Kira rolled her eyes, still fiddling with her trusty device. Doubt it, we're more like a bad case of space herpes, hard to shake off and more annoying than dangerous. Jax snorted, space herpes, now there's a legacy. The control room hummed with an awkward peace, the screens flickering to life with reports of the gods' retreat. It seemed their celestial foes had decided a tactical withdrawal was best, probably off licking their bruised egos somewhere in the cosmic ether. The static of the ship's comms crackled, and Jax slapped the console, coaxing it like a temperamental pet. The Bucket, true to form, responded with a judder that sent a warning light flashing on the panel. Ah, the joys of spacefaring in a bucket of bolts, Jax mused, flicking the warning light off with the exasperation of a parent dealing with a sulky teenager. Hey, don't knock the bucket, Tam said. She got us through a godly temper tantrum with minimal fuss. That's more than I can say for my last relationship. Kira snorted. Your last relationship was with a bottle of that horrendous moonshine from Xylar. Exactly. As the trio bantered, the ship's systems whirred back to life, the screens displaying telemetry data of the local colony's energy grid stabilizing. The cosmic energy siphoning had ceased, a testament to their efforts, or their ability to annoy the gods into submission. Looks like the colony's coming back online, Kira noted, her fingers dancing over her device. No thanks to our divine friends. Jax nodded, satisfaction settling over him like a warm blanket. Maybe they'll start lighting their torches and not their hair on fire. Tam grinned. Or maybe they'll just go back to complaining about taxes. The control room door slid open with a hiss, and an exhausted-looking colony official stumbled in, eyes wide and hair disheveled as if he'd just rolled out of bed, or a blender. Captain Varn, the official greeted with the enthusiasm of a man whose weekend plans had just been ruined by an interstellar crisis. We've received reports of the gods' retreat. Is it true? Jax leaned back, crossing his arms with a smugness that only surviving a divine skirmish could provide. Truth is subjective, but yeah, they're off to sulk in the void. The official's eyes flickered with relief, though he still looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The energy readings are stabilizing. What did you do? Kira couldn't resist chiming in. We just reminded them that they've got faces for radio and the charisma of a black hole. Basically, we annoyed them away, Tam added. Turns out gods don't like being called out on their ancient bullcrap. The official blinked, clearly not expecting irreverence to be a weapon of choice. Well, whatever you did, it worked. The colony owes you, Captain. Jax waved a dismissive hand. Just doing our part to keep the universe from swallowing its own tail. Or something poetic like that. The official nodded, seeming satisfied enough to retreat from the chaos. As he left, Jax turned back to his crew, his grin wide and full of the reckless confidence that had carried them this far. And that, folks, is how you make an impression, Jax declared, reclining in his chair like a king on a makeshift throne. Kira chuckled, her fingers finally pausing in their relentless dance over her device. An impression? More like a cosmic dent. The ship's systems continued to cycle through their diagnostics, the comforting hum a reminder that, somehow, they'd made it through in one piece. Or at least in as many pieces as they'd started with. So, Tam began, glancing around the control room with an exaggerated air of nonchalance. What's next? Another daring escapade? Or do we actually get some downtime? Jax shrugged, a twinkle of mischief in his eye. We've rattled the gods, saved a colony, and managed not to die. I'd say we deserve a drink. Kira raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. A drink? Haven't you had enough of Tam's moonshine? Jax held up his hands in surrender. Point taken. Maybe something a bit more refined this time. Like water. Tam shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips. We should celebrate our little victory in style. Maybe break out the good stuff. The good stuff? Jax echoed, incredulous. Since when do we keep the good stuff on the bucket? Kira laughed, the sound bright against the backdrop of the ship's humming systems. When you define good as anything less flammable than Tam's usual stash. The conversation drifted into comfortable silence, the kind that only came from shared survival. They'd faced the cosmos and come out the other side, a little more battered but still decidedly human. Finally, Jax stood, stretching his arms above his head. All right, crew, let's get this bucket back to Sector 13. I'm sure there's a bar somewhere that needs our patronage. Tam hopped to his feet, an eager glint in his eye. And maybe somewhere that serves fried alien critters. I'm starving. Kira rolled her eyes, following suit. As if we haven't had enough of cosmic cuisine. Together, they exited the control room, leaving the flickering screens and the echoes of their victory behind. The bucket shuddered as the engines roared to life, the ship lumbering forward like an old beast roused from sleep. As they settled into the familiar rhythms of space travel, Jax couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Not just for surviving, but for defying the odds, for proving that humanity could stand against the old gods and live to tell the tale. So, Jax said, breaking the comfortable silence, think the gods will be back for round 2? Tam shrugged, eyes fixed on the stars streaking past. Probably, but we've got time. And more snark. Kira grinned, her expression as sharp as ever. Bring him on. We're just getting started. Jax nodded, the weight of the universe settling back onto his shoulders in a way that felt less like a burden and more like a call to arms. They'd won this round, but there were always new challenges waiting in the galaxy's unending expanse. And they were ready to face them, with sarcasm and irreverence as their weapons of choice. Because in the end, that was the essence of being human. The ability to laugh in the face of the void, to find hope in the darkness, and to never, ever back down. As the bucket soared through the cosmos, Jax and his crew prepared for whatever lay ahead, their spirits unbroken and their resolve unwavering. After all, they'd taken on gods and won. What else could the universe possibly throw at them? To the next adventure, Jax said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast to the stars. To the next adventure, Kira and Tam echoed, their voices a harmony of defiance and determination. And with that, they sailed into the unknown, ready to carve their own path among the stars.